March 1889. Richard Morris Hunt sits in his New York office, staring at a letter that will define the remainder of his career. The request seems simple enough on paper. George Vanderbilt, youngest grandson of the Commodore, wants a house in the mountains of North Carolina. But Hunt knows better. This isn't a request for a house. It's a summons to build the impossible. Before we dive into the story, think about the monuments we pass every day without questioning what they truly cost to create. The mansions, the estates, the grand buildings that survived when so much else disappeared. If you're ready to discover what really lies behind America's most magnificent residence, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And drop your location and current time in the comments. Let's see who's here from the farthest place. Now let's continue with the story. Hunt is 61 years old, the first American to study architecture at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He's designed mansions for Astors and Vanderbilts, built the pedestal for the Statue of Liberty, shaped the face of American wealth in stone and mortar. But this project is different. Vanderbilt arrives at Hunt's office 3 days after the letter. He's 26 years old, unmarried, bookish, in a family known for robber baron aggression. He spreads architectural drawings across Hunt's desk: French chateaux, Renaissance palaces, buildings that took generations to complete in Europe, that required the resources of kingdoms. "I want this," Vanderbilt says, gesturing at an illustration of Chateau de Blois in North Carolina. Hunt studies the young man carefully. Most clients want the appearance of European grandeur, the suggestion of old money transplanted. They want American mansions with French windows and Italian marble, bastardized versions that approximate aristocracy without understanding it. Vanderbilt wants something else entirely: authentic reproduction. A Loire Valley chateau reconstructed in the southern Appalachians, as though geography and history mean nothing when you have enough money. "Do you understand what you're asking?" Hunt asks. Vanderbilt looks at him with the calm certainty of someone who's never been told something is impossible. "I have 125,000 acres. I have resources. I have time." "You'll need all three," Hunt replies, "and more." The architect begins explaining. The workers required, the materials, the infrastructure that doesn't exist. You can't simply build a chateau in wilderness. You have to build the roads to bring the materials, the housing for the workers, the workshops, the kilns, the sawmills. You have to construct an entire industrial operation before you can begin construction itself. Vanderbilt listens without interruption. When Hunt finishes, the young man asks one question: "Can you do it?" Hunt should refuse. He's built enough monuments to wealth. He's 61, and projects like this consume years. But architects are vain creatures, and Vanderbilt is offering something irresistible: a chance to build without compromise, to create something that will outlast everyone in this room by centuries. "Yes," Hunt says, "but you need to understand the cost won't be measured only in dollars." Vanderbilt smiles. "I'm prepared to pay whatever this requires." Hunt doubts the young man comprehends what he's just promised. No one ever does. Not until the bills come due, and by then you're too far invested to stop. The architect accepts the commission anyway. Some monuments demand to be built, regardless of the price. The workers start arriving in 1890. They come from everywhere. Italian stonemasons from Tuscany and Lombardy promised wages 3 times what they'd earn in their villages. Brickmakers from Pennsylvania. Carpenters from Tennessee. Plasterers, metalworkers, glaziers, each with specialized skills that American workers haven't yet mastered. They step off trains in Asheville expecting a construction site. Instead, they find forest. Dense, tangled wilderness stretching in every direction. No roads adequate for heavy equipment, no housing, no infrastructure whatsoever. Many turn around and leave immediately. The ones who stay do so because they need the money badly enough to build from absolute nothing. The first task isn't construction, it's creating the means to construct. Rafael Guastavino arrives to oversee specialized vaulting work, and collaborates with construction leaders already organizing the broader workforce. He looks at the wilderness and begins organizing what amounts to a military campaign. Teams divide into specialized units. One group cuts roads. Another starts erecting temporary structures. A third begins clearing land for a railway spur that will connect directly to the property. Within 6 months, a village rises from the forest floor. Workers name it Best, after a local family whose land was absorbed into Vanderbilt's holdings. Row after row of simple wooden barracks, a commissary, a hospital, workshops for every trade, brick kilns that will operate constantly for the next 5 years. The village at its peak houses over 1,000 men, making it larger than Asheville itself at the time. The conditions are rough by any measure. Workers sleep in crowded bunkhouses, 20 to 30 men in spaces designed for comfort in neither summer heat nor mountain winter. They wake before dawn, work until darkness, eat simple meals, heavy on beans and bread. There's no alcohol allowed on the property, a rule that breeds resentment and a black market. But the wages are real. Skilled stonemasons earn $4 per day, when farm laborers in North Carolina make 50 cents. Even unskilled workers pulling materials earn enough to send money home. For Italian immigrants especially, this becomes their American dream. Not building their own future, but constructing someone else's monument while saving for the life they actually want. The railway spur takes 8 months to complete. 3 miles of track connecting the property to the main line, capable of handling the weight that's coming. Because Hunt's specifications require materials that don't exist locally. Indiana limestone for the exterior, oak and walnut from forests hundreds of miles away, marble from Italy, slate from Virginia, every element selected for quality, regardless of distance or difficulty. Brick production begins in earnest. The estate will require millions of bricks for interior walls, chimneys, support structures. Workers dig clay from the property itself, press it into molds, stack it in kilns that burn day and night. The smoke becomes a constant presence, visible for miles. Local residents begin calling the place that factory in the mountains. Not entirely wrong. By 1891, the workforce peaks at over 1,000 men. They've built 30 buildings in the temporary village, laid miles of road, created industrial capacity that rivals small cities. And they haven't yet poured a single foundation for the main house. Hunt visits regularly from New York, watching this empire of preparation take shape. He understands what Vanderbilt still doesn't fully grasp. Every grand building throughout history required this hidden foundation of labor. European chateaus rose on the backs of local populations with nowhere else to go, no other options for survival. Here in North Carolina, Hunt and Vanderbilt are importing that same system wholesale, buying labor instead of commanding it through feudal obligation. The distinction matters legally, but not practically. These men will pour years of their lives into a building they'll never own, never occupy, barely even see completed. They're here because capitalism and immigration created conditions where this seemed like opportunity, the best available option in a world of limited choices. The village of Best grows more permanent with each passing month, acquiring amenities that suggest longer occupation than anyone initially planned. The hospital expands. A school opens for workers' children. Some men send for their families, transforming temporary employment into something approaching settlement. They don't know yet that none of this will last, that Best itself is as temporary as the scaffolding that will eventually surround the house, that they're building their own obsolescence into every brick they lay. Vanderbilt rejects the first limestone samples, then the second batch, and the third. Hunt watches his client examine each piece with jeweler's precision, searching for flaws invisible to most eyes. The young man wants perfection, which in architectural terms means Indiana limestone. Nothing else will do. The numbers involved are staggering. Hunt's specifications call for roughly 10 million pounds of stone, Not rough blocks to be shaped on site, but precisely cut pieces, each numbered and fitted to exact positions in the design. The chateau will rise like an enormous three-dimensional puzzle, limestone pieces traveling nearly 700 miles from Midwest quarries to North Carolina mountains. The Indiana Limestone Company receives the largest single residential order in its history. Quarry workers in Bedford and Bloomington begin cutting stone that will become walls, columns, window frames, decorative elements. Each block gets inspected multiple times, measurements verified to fractions of inches, surface texture examined for consistency. Rejected pieces go to lesser projects or get recut entirely. Quality control becomes obsessive. Hunt stations a supervisor at the quarries whose sole job is rejection. Roughly 30% of cut stone fails inspection. The waste is extraordinary, the cost multiplying with each rejected block. Vanderbilt doesn't flinch at the invoices. He wants his chateau to match French originals built by kings with unlimited resources. He'll spend accordingly. The logistics challenge what's possible with 1890s infrastructure. Each limestone block requires custom wooden crating for rail transport. The weight means special freight cars, careful loading, routes planned to avoid steep grades that might shift cargo. A single damaged block delays construction while replacement pieces get quarried, cut, inspected, and shipped. At the North Carolina site, specialized craftsmen wait for their materials. Italian stone carvers capable of Renaissance-level detail. Men trained in techniques most American builders never learned. They'll transform Hunt's drawings into three-dimensional reality, carving ornamental elements that match 16th-century French chateaux. The first shipments arrive in spring of 1892. Workers unload massive blocks, checking numbers against master plans. Each piece has a designated location. Mix them up and the entire system collapses. A warehouse gets built specifically for limestone storage, organized with military precision. Then the carving begins. This work can't be rushed. A single window frame might require weeks of careful shaping. Decorative elements demand even more time. The carvers work outdoors when weather permits, moving to covered workshops during rain. Stone dust fills the air constantly. The men wrap cloth around their faces, but still their lungs fill with microscopic particles. It's killing them slowly, though most won't live long enough to see the full damage. Hunt specified Indiana limestone for reasons beyond aesthetics. The stone is relatively soft when first quarried, easier to carve with precision. It hardens over time through exposure to air, becoming more durable. This quality made it perfect for detailed work. It also meant any mistakes were costly. A carving error might require starting over with fresh stone, adding months to timelines and thousands to budgets. By 1893, limestone continues arriving in weekly shipments. The railway spur operates constantly, freight cars loaded with stone moving in, while empty cars roll out. The system functions like a massive conveyor belt, feeding raw material into a construction site that's become an industrial operation. The official accounting lists limestone costs at roughly $130,000. In modern terms, over $4 million. But that figure only covers quarrying and transport. Add inspection costs, rejection waste, specialized labor, storage, and the real number doubles, maybe triples. Nobody's tracking with that level of detail because Vanderbilt never asks for itemized breakdowns. Local residents watch trainload after trainload arrive and begin understanding the scale of what's being built. This isn't a house. It's a statement carved in stone, a declaration that wealth can accomplish anything, even transporting entire quarries across half a continent to satisfy one man's vision of perfection. The limestone keeps coming, block after numbered block, each one selected, inspected, transported, carved, fitted. Each one representing hours of human labor and geological time compressed into architectural ambition. The chateau will stand for centuries. The men building it won't live to see 1895. Frederick Law Olmsted walks Vanderbilt's property in the summer of 1888 and sees disaster. The man who designed Central Park, who shaped how Americans think about landscape, stands in exhausted farmland and understands the magnitude of what he's being asked to accomplish. 125,000 acres. Sounds impressive until you examine the soil. Decades of cotton and corn cultivation have stripped nutrients, caused erosion, left the earth depleted. The forests are logged over, reduced to scrubby second growth. Streams run muddy from erosion. This land is used up, discarded by agriculture, and left to recover on its own timescale. Vanderbilt wants European gardens, formal terraces, rolling parkland, the picturesque scenery of English estates and French chateaux. He wants instant landscape maturity that took European properties centuries to achieve. Olmsted explains patiently that you cannot simply plant such things and expect immediate results. Then we'll import maturity, Vanderbilt replies. So they do. The project becomes landscape construction on a scale never before attempted in America. Olmsted establishes a nursery operation that will eventually grow to become one of the largest in the country, not to sell plants, but to supply a single estate. The soil itself requires replacement in many areas. Trainloads of rich topsoil travel from Tennessee and Virginia. Workers spread it across acres that will become gardens and parkland. The estate purchases entire mature trees, some 30 feet tall, transported on specially built wagons, and replanted with elaborate care. Many die anyway. They buy more. Olmsted hires Gifford Pinchot, a young forester recently returned from European training, to manage woodland restoration. Pinchot surveys the damaged forests and develops what becomes one of America's first managed forestry programs. Not preservation, but active intervention, selective cutting, replanting, fire management. The goal is making damaged land productive again, while creating the aesthetic Vanderbilt desires. The scale of planting defies belief. Over 250 acres designated for formal gardens and parkland. Tens of thousands of plants and trees, azaleas by the thousand. Rhododendrons imported from across the world. Rose varieties from Europe. Native species relocated from other parts of the property. Each plant selected for specific visual effects in specific seasons. Olmsted's crew builds a 3-mile approach road that winds through designed landscape, revealing the house gradually through carefully planned sight lines. Every curve calculated for effect. Trees planted to frame specific views. The road itself becomes architecture, transforming the journey into anticipation. The costs multiply beyond any initial estimates. Olmsted's invoices pile up as the work continues year after year. Drainage systems for the gardens, irrigation infrastructure, greenhouses for plant propagation. A complete nursery facility with propagation beds, cold frames, storage buildings. The landscape budget rivals the house construction costs, though nobody advertises this fact. By 1893, over 1 million plants have been set into Vanderbilt's property. The nursery operation employs dozens of specialized workers year-round. Gardeners trained in European techniques, foresters managing thousands of acres, landscape laborers moving earth and plants according to Olmsted's intricate designs. The formal gardens near the house receive the most intensive work. The Italian garden, with its 3 reflecting pools, the walled garden, spanning 4 acres with Victorian-style plantings, the shrub garden, the azalea garden, each one requiring specific soil conditions, drainage, ongoing maintenance. These aren't gardens that sustain themselves. They demand constant human intervention to maintain the illusion of natural beauty. Olmsted himself grows increasingly frustrated with Vanderbilt's constant changes and additions. The landscape architect is 66 years old, dealing with his own declining health, trying to complete a project that keeps expanding. He writes to his partners about the difficulties of working with unlimited money. It sounds like complaining about champagne problems, but there's real struggle in trying to create something coherent when the client can afford every whim. The reforestation work proves more successful than the formal gardens. Pinchot's managed forestry techniques restore thousands of acres to productive woodland. This work will outlast everything else, becoming a model for American forestry programs. But that legacy remains decades away. In the moment, it's simply another expensive component of Vanderbilt's vision. The landscape cost isn't fully documented, but estimates suggest over $1 million spent on Olmsted's work alone. Modern equivalent approaches $35 million. To create the appearance of natural beauty, to make exhausted farmland look like it has always been pristine estate grounds, to construct a fantasy landscape worthy of the fantasy chateau rising at its center. The first death happens in October of 1891, a mason working on scaffolding 4 stories up. Witnesses say the wooden platform gave way. Others claim he simply lost his footing. The result is the same. He falls 40 feet onto limestone blocks waiting to be set. The estate doctor arrives quickly, but there's nothing to do. The worker dies within minutes, his body broken on stone that was meant to become someone else's monument. His name doesn't appear in estate records. His family in Italy receives a brief telegram, and nothing more. The wages stop immediately. Construction sites kill people. This is understood, accepted even. In the 1890s, worker deaths are considered operational costs, statistical inevitabilities. Safety regulations barely exist. Life insurance is rare. Families of dead workers have no legal recourse, no compensation system, nothing but sudden poverty. The exact death toll at Biltmore remains unknown. Estate records don't document worker fatalities with the same precision reserved for limestone shipments or lumber costs, but evidence accumulates in other places. Cemetery records in Asheville, death certificates filed with the county, references in letters home that survive in Italian village archives. Construction continues through brutal conditions. Summer heat in North Carolina reaches oppressive levels, particularly for men working with fire. The brick kilns operate constantly, workers feeding them wood and coal, tending fires that raise temperatures past 100 degrees. Heat exhaustion claims several workers. Some recover, others don't. Winter brings different dangers. 1893 sees particularly harsh cold. Workers continue building through freezing temperatures because construction deadlines don't pause for weather. Frostbite affects men working with wet mortar and stone. Fingers and toes go numb, turn black, sometimes require amputation by the estate doctor who's treating injuries he was never trained to handle. The hospital in Best exists because injuries are constant. Cuts from tools, crushed hands and feet from dropped materials, burns from equipment, broken bones from falls. The doctor does what he can with limited supplies and 19th century medical knowledge. Infections kill as readily as accidents. Antibiotics don't exist yet. Even minor injuries can become fatal. Disease spreads through the crowded barracks. 20 to 30 men sleeping in close quarters, sharing facilities, working exhausted. Influenza moves through the workforce in waves. Pneumonia takes men weakened by other conditions. Tuberculosis finds ideal conditions in the dusty air and cramped housing. Some workers return home sick. Others get buried in North Carolina soil, far from families who will never visit their graves. The stonemasons develop lung conditions from constant dust exposure. The fine particles settle deep in tissue, causing damage that won't manifest fully for years. These men are carving their own slow deaths into decorative elements they'll never see completed. The carvers wrap cloth around their faces, but it's inadequate protection. They know this. They continue anyway because the alternative is starvation wages or no wages at all. Equipment accidents increase as pressure mounts to meet deadlines. The estate operates steam-powered machinery, hoists, rail equipment, all of it dangerous in the best conditions, lethal when workers are exhausted, and supervisors prioritize speed over safety. A cable snaps, crushes a worker against a wall. A hoist fails, drops a load of bricks on men below. Each incident brings brief work stoppage while bodies get removed, then construction resumes. Guastavino pushes the workforce hard. He's building his own reputation alongside Vanderbilt's house. The architect becomes known for innovative vaulting techniques, fireproof tile construction that will influence American building for decades. His legacy gets built on worker bodies that history forgets. The workers themselves rarely complain publicly. Speaking out means termination, blacklisting, deportation for immigrants. Better to endure dangerous conditions than lose wages entirely. They write letters home describing the work as difficult but worthwhile. They don't mention the deaths, don't describe the injuries, don't admit they're working in conditions that violate every reasonable standard of human dignity. By 1894, hundreds of men have cycled through Biltmore construction. Many leave voluntarily, finding the conditions unsustainable. Others leave permanently, buried in local cemeteries, or shipped home in coffins their families can barely afford. The exact numbers remain deliberately obscure. Hunt's records focus on construction progress. Vanderbilt's attention stays fixed on his chateau, rising against the mountains. The cost in human suffering never appears in official accounting. Spring of 1895. Vanderbilt announces he wants to spend Christmas in his new house. Hunt calculates rapidly and realizes the timeline is impossible. The chateau is nowhere near completion. Entire wings remain unfinished. Rooms lack plaster. Decorative elements aren't carved. The grounds are construction zones. But you don't tell George Vanderbilt something cannot be done. Not when he's already invested millions. Not when his vision has consumed 6 years and 1,000 workers. Hunt agrees to the deadline, knowing full well what it will require. The workforce doubles almost overnight. New workers arrive weekly, adding to crews already stretched thin. The estate becomes a round-the-clock operation. Night shifts work by electric light, one of the first construction sites in America to use Edison's system extensively. The lights burn through darkness, visible for miles, making the chateau glow like a beacon through mountain nights. Corners get cut where they won't show immediately. Interior rooms that guests won't access get minimal finishing work. Entire floors in the servants' wing remain rough construction. The fourth floor, planned for additional guest rooms, stays completely unfinished. Workers board up doorways, hide incomplete spaces behind locked doors. The pressure becomes unbearable. Supervisors push exhausted crews harder. Mistakes increase. Injuries multiply. The estate hospital treats more men in the final 8 months than the previous 4 years combined. Some workers collapse from exhaustion and never return to work. Hunt makes strategic decisions about what must be completed and what can wait. The main entrance hall receives priority. The banquet hall, the library, the breakfast room, guest bedrooms on the second floor. These spaces need to appear finished, magnificent, worthy of the Vanderbilt name. Everything else becomes negotiable. Decorative elements get simplified on the fly. Planned carvings become plain surfaces. Elaborate tile work gets replaced with simpler patterns. Guastavino adapts his designs, maintaining structural integrity while sacrificing ornamental complexity. The compromises pain him professionally, but physics and time leave no alternatives. The furnishings arrive in a chaotic rush. Vanderbilt has been collecting for years. European antiques purchased through dealers, artwork acquired from galleries, and private collections, tapestries, sculptures, furniture pieces, each one carefully selected. Now they all arrive simultaneously, creating a logistics nightmare as workers try to finish rooms while other crews attempt to furnish them. By November, the timeline looks achievable if nothing goes wrong. Then, winter weather arrives early. A hard freeze, damages uncured mortar in exterior walls. Rain delays outdoor work. Workers slip on icy scaffolding. The schedule compresses further. Hunt visits in December and sees controlled chaos. Plasterers working alongside furniture installers. Painters sharing spaces with electricians still running final connections. The house smells of fresh paint, wet plaster, sawdust, and desperation. It's magnificent and incomplete simultaneously. A beautiful fraud held together by strategic hiding of unfinished spaces. Christmas Eve, 1895. Vanderbilt arrives with his new wife, Edith Stuyvesant Dresser, whom he married in Paris months earlier. The couple approaches via Olmsted's carefully designed road. The chateau appears gradually through winter landscape, its limestone facade glowing in afternoon light. The main entrance is spectacular. The entrance hall soars 70 feet overhead. Its ceiling painted, its walls paneled. The banquet hall displays its magnificence. The library showcases 10,000 volumes already shelved. The rooms designated for family viewing are complete, polished, ready for occupancy. Behind locked doors throughout the house, construction debris waits. Unfinished rooms, incomplete spaces, entire areas that won't be completed for another year. The guests who will visit in coming weeks won't see these spaces, won't know that significant portions of America's largest house remain unbuilt. The workers who made this possible are absent from Christmas celebrations. They're back in barracks at best, exhausted from months of brutal schedules. Some will continue working through winter. Others will leave, replaced by new crews who will finish what the deadline made impossible. Vanderbilt hosts Christmas dinner in his banquet hall, 60 feet long, 42 feet wide, 75 feet to the ceiling. The room seats 60 guests comfortably, fireplace large enough to burn entire logs, Flemish tapestries on the walls. The table displays European silver, French crystal, Limoges china. The house is both triumph and illusion. Complete where it matters for appearances. Unfinished where wealthy guests won't venture. A monument to what money can accomplish when deadlines matter more than completion. The hidden spaces will eventually get finished. But on this Christmas night, Biltmore represents something quintessentially American. The appearance of achievement mattering more than the reality beneath. The official figure appears in financial records years later, $6 million. The number gets repeated in newspapers, architectural journals, society columns. In today's currency, roughly $190 million. A staggering sum for a private residence, dwarfing anything built in America before it. But that number tells a fraction of the actual story. The $6 million covers construction only. The physical building, Hunt's fees, materials, labor for the chateau itself. Everything else gets categorized separately, hidden in different accounting ledgers that few people ever examine comprehensively. Start with the land. Vanderbilt acquired 125,000 acres over several years. Some purchased outright. Other parcels obtained through intermediaries to avoid price inflation. The total land cost never appears in construction budgets. Conservative estimates suggest at least $500,000, possibly double that. Add another $15 million in modern terms. Olmsted's landscape work carries separate accounting. His firm billed the estate for over a decade of planning and implementation. The nursery operations, the forestry program, the approach road, the formal gardens, documented expenses exceed $1 million. That's another $30 million today. And this covers only documented costs, not the ongoing maintenance operations that began immediately. The furnishings represent another massive expenditure that construction budgets ignore. Vanderbilt spent years acquiring European antiques, artwork, tapestries, books. He purchased entire room contents from French chateaux, bought sculptures from Italian dealers, acquired paintings from galleries across Europe. The art collection alone cost hundreds of thousands. The furniture, china, silver, linens, Decorative objects add hundreds of thousands more. Estimate another 20 to 30 million in current dollars. Then there are costs that don't appear in any ledger, because nobody bothered tracking them properly. The Village of Best required constant maintenance, food for workers, medical care, tools and equipment, housing upkeep. These operational expenses ran continuously for 6 years, but were considered incidental, not worth itemizing separately. The railway spur to the property cost approximately $75,000. Infrastructure that served no purpose except Biltmore construction. 3 miles of track that will eventually fall into disuse once building ends. Another hidden expense in the true accounting. Vanderbilt employed full-time staff in New York and Europe, doing nothing but purchasing for Biltmore. Agents scouring auction houses, negotiating with dealers, arranging shipping. Their salaries and expenses never factored into construction costs, but were entirely devoted to the project. The ongoing costs began before construction finished. By 1895, the estate employed dozens of gardeners, groundskeepers, maintenance staff. Their wages came from Vanderbilt's personal accounts, not construction budgets. But they're part of what Biltmore truly cost. A mansion this size doesn't simply exist. It requires constant human effort to maintain the illusion of effortless grandeur. Add everything together, and the real figure approaches 10 million in period dollars. In modern terms, somewhere between 300 to 400 million. Triple the official cost. Quadruple it if you include the first years of operational expenses. But even this expanded accounting misses the deepest costs. The workers who died building it. The families displaced when Vanderbilt assembled his property. The servants who will spend lifetimes maintaining spaces they'll never truly occupy. The broader social cost of concentrating this much wealth and effort into a single family's residence while most Americans lived in poverty. Economic historians point out that $6 million in 1895 represented an almost incomprehensible concentration of capital. The entire federal budget that year was approximately $360 million. Vanderbilt spent roughly 1.5% of total government expenditure on a house. One building consumed resources equivalent to small government agencies. The Vanderbilt family wealth came from railroads, shipping, real estate, industries built on labor exploitation, monopolistic practices, political corruption. The Commodore, George's grandfather, was called a robber baron for good reason. That wealth, extracted from workers and consumers, crystallized in North Carolina as limestone and marble. Vanderbilt himself wasn't personally cruel. He paid his construction workers reasonably by contemporary standards. He invested in forestry programs that benefited conservation. He collected art and made it accessible to visitors. But individual decency doesn't absolve systemic exploitation. The invoice no one saw was presented to American workers, farmers, small business owners crushed by railroad monopolies, to immigrants who built the infrastructure that made Vanderbilt wealth possible, to everyone who paid inflated shipping rates because the Vanderbilts controlled transportation. They financed Biltmore through countless small extractions, invisible transfers of wealth upward. The chateau stands as their monument too, not to their achievement, but to what was taken from them. $6 million documented. $10 million actual. Incalculable human cost. All to build what one man considered a comfortable home. The basement of Biltmore stretches beneath the entire main structure, over an acre of space devoted entirely to service functions. Kitchens, laundries, storage rooms, workshops, servants' dining areas. A complete parallel world designed to support the luxury above while remaining invisible to it. The servants enter through separate doors. They use separate staircases. They navigate a maze of corridors that guests never see, never suspect exists. The house contains over 4 miles of servants' passages, allowing staff to move throughout the building without ever appearing in family spaces except when duties require it. At peak operation, Biltmore employs approximately 60 to 80 servants. The exact number fluctuates with seasons and guest presence. Some live on the estate full-time. Others come daily from Asheville or nearby communities. Together they form an invisible army maintaining the appearance of effortless elegance. The hierarchy is rigid and precisely structured. At the top sits the estate superintendent, managing overall operations. Below him, department heads control specific domains. The head housekeeper oversees female staff. The butler commands male servants. The chef rules the kitchen with absolute authority. Each domain has its own internal ranks, its own rules, its own social stratification. The main kitchen occupies enormous space in the basement, multiple cooking stations, wood-fired ranges, coal-burning ovens, preparation areas for different food types, storage rooms kept at different temperatures, a rotisserie large enough to roast entire animals. The kitchen staff works in heat that regularly exceeds 100 degrees, preparing elaborate multi-course meals for family and guests who will never visit this space. Adjacent to the kitchen sits the servants' dining room. Here the staff eats. At scheduled times, their meals considerably simpler than what they prepare for the family. The food is adequate, sometimes good, but the contrast between what they serve and what they consume is unmistakable. They eat quickly, aware that duties wait and personal time is limited. The laundry operations occupy another large basement area. Industrial-scale washing equipment, drying rooms, ironing stations, sewing areas for repairs. Multiple servants work full-time just maintaining linens, clothing, tablecloths, all the fabric requirements of a house. House this size. The work is hot, wet, physically exhausting. Laundresses develop calloused hands, respiratory problems from steam and chemicals, chronic back pain from lifting and carrying. Servants' bedrooms are located on the upper floors, tucked into less desirable spaces. Small rooms, simply furnished. A bed, a dresser, perhaps a chair. No private bathrooms. Shared facilities down the hall. The rooms are clean and maintained, but they're clearly utilitarian spaces, not homes. Servants live in the same building as unimaginable luxury while occupying its most basic accommodations. The workday begins before the family wakes and extends past when they sleep. Kitchen staff start at 5 in the morning preparing breakfast. Chambermaids clean bedrooms while guests are at breakfast. Footmen serve meals, answer summonses, perform countless small tasks. Groundskeepers maintain the landscape regardless of weather. The work is constant, the hours long. The personal freedom, minimal. Servants receive one afternoon off per week, if duties allow. Some attend church on Sundays. Others visit family in Asheville. Many are too exhausted to do anything but rest. The isolation of the estate means limited social opportunities outside work. For servants who live on site, their entire existence revolves around Biltmore. The wages vary by position and experience. Senior staff like the butler or head housekeeper earn respectable middle-class incomes. Lower-ranking servants make subsistence wages. Everyone receives room and board, which has real value but also binds them to the estate. Quitting means losing housing and meals immediately. The system encourages dependency. Some servants spend decades at Biltmore. They arrive young and leave old, their entire working lives devoted to maintaining someone else's home. They witness family celebrations, tragedies, daily routines. They know intimate details of Vanderbilt private life. Yet they remain fundamentally separate, perpetually on the outside of the world they maintain. The estate provides minimal retirement benefits. Longtime servants might receive small pensions, more charity than obligation. Many work into old age because they have no alternative. When they can no longer work, they face poverty. The magnificent house they spent lifetimes maintaining offers no security for their final years. Visitors to Biltmore today tour the basement spaces, now empty and silent. They marvel at the scale of kitchen operations, the complexity of service systems. Tour guides explain how the house functioned, how servants moved invisibly through the building. What they rarely mention is that this system represented normalized exploitation, decent people participating in structures that consumed human lives to maintain architectural grandeur. The servants' quarters tell a truth the mansion's beauty obscures. Every moment of family comfort required multiple servants working. Every elegant meal meant kitchen staff laboring in heat. Every pristine room meant chambermaids scrubbing invisible dirt. The chateau was never just a building. It was a machine for converting human effort into aristocratic lifestyle. By 1896, the chateau stands largely complete. The workforce that built it begins dispersing. Some return to Italy with savings that will purchase land or businesses. Others move to new construction projects across America, their skills in demand. Many simply vanish into the historical record, their time at Biltmore leaving no trace beyond their labor frozen in limestone. Best served its purpose. The temporary village that housed over 1,000 workers at peak capacity no longer justifies its existence. The estate begins systematic dismantling. Buildings that took months to construct come down in weeks. Lumber gets salvaged for other uses. The brick kilns cool permanently. The workshops empty. Some structures survive temporarily with new purposes. The hospital becomes storage. Worker barracks get converted to housing for permanent estate employees. The commissary operates briefly, serving the reduced workforce still finishing interior details and maintaining the grounds. But these are delays, not permanence. Best is dying, and everyone knows it. The workers who remain are mostly skilled craftsmen, finishing details that couldn't be rushed. Carpenters installing final woodwork. Electricians completing the elaborate lighting systems. Plumbers finishing bathroom fixtures and upper floors that weren't priority during the Christmas deadline. These men work in a ghost town, surrounded by empty buildings and memories of the massive workforce that preceded them. The families who settled in Best face difficult choices. Some followed husbands and fathers to North Carolina, expecting temporary stays that stretched into years. Children were born there. Small communities formed. Now those communities dissolve as employment ends. Most families leave. A few remain in the Asheville area, finding other work, putting down reluctant roots in a place they never intended to call home. The railway spur continues operating, but with dramatically reduced traffic. No more limestone shipments, no more trainloads of materials. Occasional supply deliveries for the estate, nothing more. The 3 miles of track that once represented industrial ambition now serves minimal function. Eventually, it will be abandoned entirely. The rails. Pulled up, the right-of-way reclaimed by forest. Olmsted's nursery operation survives longer than the construction village. The estate still needs plants for ongoing landscape work. But the scale reduces drastically. The massive propagation facilities shrink. Workers are laid off. What remains is a fraction of the industrial gardening operation that supplied Biltmore's construction. By 1900, little physical evidence of Best remains visible. The forest that was cleared for the village begins reclaiming the land. Saplings grow where barracks stood. Vines cover foundation remnants. Nature erases human occupation with remarkable speed when maintenance ceases. Local residents remember the village. Stories circulate about the massive construction operation, the 1,000 workers, the industrial scale of building Vanderbilt's chateau. But memories fade. Children who grew up near Best during construction become adults for whom it's distant history. Within a generation, the village becomes almost mythical. Its exact location uncertain, its structures gone. The workers themselves scatter so thoroughly that tracking them becomes nearly impossible. Italian stonemasons return to villages that have changed during their absence. American laborers move to other jobs in other states. The temporary community that formed at Best dissolves completely, its members disappearing into the broader American working class. Some workers die in North Carolina and stay permanently. Cemetery records in Asheville document burials of men with Italian names, construction workers whose families couldn't afford to ship bodies home. These graves represent the permanent residents of Best, men who came to build a mansion and instead found their final resting place far from home. The estate retains no official memory of the construction village. Tour guides eventually won't mention it. Historical accounts will focus on Vanderbilt and Hunt and Olmsted, on famous names and architectural achievement. Best and its 1,000 workers become footnotes, barely mention details in the story of American grandeur. Archaeological surveys in recent decades have located Best's approximate site. Foundation remnants, trash deposits, physical evidence of the village that housed the workforce. But these traces are fragmentary, insufficient to reconstruct daily life or honor the men who lived there. The disappearance of Best represents something larger than simple demolition. It's the erasure of labor from the historical narrative. The workers who built Biltmore become invisible, their contribution forgotten, their names lost. The chateau remains as testament to Vanderbilt vision and Hunt genius and Olmsted artistry. The men who actually constructed it vanish as thoroughly as the village they inhabited. Today, forest covers where Best stood. Tourists driving to Biltmore pass near the site without knowing. The trees give no indication that 1,000 men once lived there, worked there, built temporary lives there while constructing permanent monuments. The land has reclaimed itself. History has forgotten them. Only the chateau remembers, silently, in every limestone block they carved and set. Biltmore opens to the public in 1930, 35 years after construction began. The decision comes from economic necessity, not generosity. The Great Depression has devastated even Vanderbilt wealth. Opening the estate to tourists generates revenue that helps maintain the property. Americans line up to glimpse how the other half lived, paying admission to walk through rooms they could never afford to occupy. Today, over 1 million visitors tour Biltmore annually. They marvel at the 250 rooms, the 65 fireplaces, the 43 bathrooms. They photograph the banquet hall, the library, the entrance hall soaring 70 feet overhead. Tour guides share statistics about construction time, number of workers, tons of limestone. The numbers are impressive, carefully curated to inspire awe. What the tours rarely emphasize is the system that made Biltmore possible. The Gilded Age wealth concentration that allowed one family to command resources equivalent to small nations. The labor practices that made 1,000 workers available for a single private residence. The economic structures that funneled capital upward while keeping workers perpetually insecure. The chateau represents the peak of an era. American aristocracy attempting to recreate European nobility through architecture and lifestyle. The Vanderbilts, Astors, Carnegies, Rockefellers all built monuments to their wealth, but Biltmore stands apart in scale and ambition. It's the fullest expression of Gilded Age excess, the moment when American capitalism most nakedly displayed its capacity for inequality. George Vanderbilt lived in his chateau for only 19 years. He died in 1914 following complications from appendicitis, just 51 years old. His widow Edith remained at Biltmore, managing the estate through World War I and the economic upheavals that followed. She opened the house to the public, transforming private excess into commercial enterprise. The monument to one man's vision became a business venture necessary for its own survival. The forestry program that Gifford Pinchot initiated became Biltmore's most positive legacy. The managed forests demonstrated that scientific forestry could restore damaged land while generating revenue. Pinchot went on to found the U.S. Forest Service, bringing Biltmore techniques to public land management nationwide. The forests outlasted the Gilded Age, offering genuine environmental benefit that aristocratic gardens never could. But we shouldn't let positive outcomes obscure the fundamental reality. Biltmore was built through exploitation. Not the cartoonish villainy of slavery or outright violence, but the normalized exploitation of capitalism. Workers paid wages that seemed generous while remaining far below the value they created. servants given employment that consumed their lives while providing minimal security, a system presented as opportunity that functioned as extraction. The hidden cost wasn't just the workers who died, or the servants who sacrificed decades. It was the moral compromise embedded in accepting such inequality as natural. The Gilded Age normalized wealth concentration that would have shocked earlier generations. Vanderbilt wasn't uniquely cruel. He was representative. That's what makes Biltmore significant. It shows what an entire society considered acceptable. We visit Biltmore today and struggle with contradictory reactions. The craftsmanship is genuine. The architecture is magnificent. The preservation allows us to experience history directly. But appreciating beauty doesn't require ignoring the cost. We can acknowledge that something is both beautiful and built on exploitation, that architectural achievement and moral failure can coexist in the same structure. The real monument isn't to Vanderbilt vision or Hunt's genius. It's to a moment when American capitalism operated with minimal restraint, when labor was cheap and lives were cheaper, when one family could command the resources of thousands without society questioning the arrangement, when building a chateau larger than European palaces seemed not grotesque, but admirable. Biltmore survives because it was built to last centuries. The workers who constructed it lasted only their brief lifetimes. Most died in poverty. None achieved the security or comfort they helped create for the Vanderbilt family. Their labor became someone else's legacy, their effort transformed into someone else's monument. The hidden cost of building America's greatest mansion was the same hidden cost of building America itself. Wealth extracted from many and concentrated in few. Labor that created grandeur while receiving subsistence. A system that produced magnificent results while grinding up the people who made those results possible. Biltmore just makes it visible in limestone and marble, frozen in architecture too beautiful to ignore, and too honest to fully celebrate. Think about that the next time you see a mansion, an estate, any monument to individual wealth. Ask yourself who built it, what they were paid, whether they survived to see it completed. The buildings remain. The builders vanish. That's not accident, that's design. And understanding that is the real story Biltmore tells, if we're willing to hear it. If this story changed how you see American grandeur, click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because there are countless more monuments hiding similar truths, and someone needs to tell those stories too.